Sharon Thomson,
Yes.
thank you for
welcome.
sharing your work. That's a wonderful piece. Can you talk a little bit about where it came from or what inspired it?
Let's see. I'm part of an international movement of women called the Grail. It's an international movement. It's in 20 countries around the world, including the United States. And we have various centers around the United States. There are about 5 of them. And then groups that aren't centers, but they're Grail people in a particular region, and they meet a lot. I was living 2 years ago at Grailville, which is in Loveland, excuse me, in Loveland, Ohio. And it's one of our larger and more central Grail centers. And it was their 50th anniversary. It was founded out there in Ohio in 1944, Grailville was. And we wanted something to celebrate that occasion. And I have done various ritual theater pieces within the Grail and begun to write them for groups outside the Grail also. And they asked if I would write something for the occasion. And I usually don't do occasional things, but I had been thinking about the Grail myth for a while because we're called the Grail movement, and we really don't do anything with the myth. And I know that when it was founded, when the Grail was founded in 1920s, that the people who founded it understood why they were calling it the Grail. It had something to do with the myth. So that set me on a research that took about a year or two. And the nature of that research was to understand, first of all, what is the myth, and then to understand what is essential about the myth that I could extract and create a ritual theater piece out of. So what inspired me to create the work was the needs of my Grail community. And in the course of my research, I discovered that the Grail myth is not just a story. That Jesse Weston, who was one of the prominent researchers and scholars of the Grail myth back in the 1920s, uncovered the fact that the Grail was once part of a ritual, that there was an original fertility ritual that would take place. And that the Grail stories and that's okay. That's right, I'm revved up. After rehearsal, I can't.
That was a great rehearsal. That was a great rehearsal.
I'm like this. I go home, I eat dinner, I watch TV, these dopey late night shows because I can't sleep. Except last night I went home and I played the Celtic harp and I couldn't stop. I was falling asleep playing the Celtic harp, and I said, I love this instrument. I've got to have it.
I know, and now you're a Celtic harpist.
And I'm a Celtic harpist. I said, I know this instrument from somewhere. This is not my first encounter. I said, I've got to have it. It's Leslie's, actually, but now I know I'm going to have to go and get one. And there was something about it. You know, I've been very much into the drum also, but this was like another kind of sensation, and I couldn't stop. And it was doing things in my ear and in my mind, and so I said, do I dare do this in public? Because I knew we needed it at that certain point. And Maureen came over to work at the center today, and I said, Maureen, listen to this. And I did it. I said, do I sound stupid? She said, no, that sounds good. I said, okay.
So now you're a Celtic harpist.
So now I'm a Celtic harpist.
Celtic harpist. Wow, that's great.
I said,
creativity just flows.
Well, and what Maureen said, and I said about the drum, she said, but Sharon, this because you're able to play. It's just about playing. It really is. And I find it, in fact, much easier to play with that kind of stuff than with words. With words, it's harder. I take them more seriously. So it's much harder for me to, like, sit down and say, okay, now I'm playing. It's like every word's got to be just right.
How long have you been writing?
Since I was 12 years old. When I was 12, I knew that I was going to be a writer. So I thought I was going to be a novelist or a journalist. And so I asked my family, who was this hard-drinking, hard-playing, hard-fighting Brooklyn street family. And I said, okay, I would like, and they were great, they were always great at Christmas. They had a Christmas club, and they were like always putting it, Christmas was a feast. So whatever you wanted, you got. So I would like for Christmas this year a typewriter. And I said, typewriter? Okay. Now these are people, most of them never even finished high school.
Wow.
But I I was going to school, and you have to write these compositions, and they were always like really good. And even I went to Catholic school, and the nuns would say, "Hey, that's really good." And I'd bring them home, and they would read them. And they said, "This is really good." So they took it seriously. So they got me one of these old Remington business machines, because that's all there was then. There weren't even portables then. God, am I that old? No, I'm not that old. This beautiful old business machine. They brought it home for Christmas. And I spent all of Christmas vacation. I didn't go out and play it and do it. I just stayed in my room, and I wrote my first short story. It was called Love in Paris.
Did it get published?
It was terrible. No. Why would it get published? It was trash.
Okay.
But it was my first story. But at the end of my Christmas vacation, I brought it down to my family, who were drinking and smoking their Camels, hanging out of their mouths and playing cards at the table and all this, right? And I said, I finished my story. They said, "Oh, great, let's look at it." And they sat there and they read it. And they passed it around the table. They all read it. And they said, "This is fantastic. This is great. This is the best thing that any 12-year-old has ever written." I was like,
That's great.
I know. But the only way that they were like that was because they didn't know any better. You see, if I had come from a more sophisticated or educated family, they said, "Well, that's nice, dear," or something, you know. But they really believed like that I was their little genius. And they encouraged me. So they made me believe in myself as a writer. And that was a great gift, because they were crazy. But that was a great gift that they gave me.
That really was. That's wonderful.
So they always encouraged me and told me I was going to be a famous writer someday.
Wow. Now, you have been writing poetry?
No, I hated poetry.
You hated poetry. How did this come out to be a poetry theater piece then?
I hated poetry. I ended up on the school paper in high school and all of that. And I was on the path to be a journalist or a novelist. And then I went to my first year of college. I left Catholic school and I went off to Brooklyn College, you know. And I left the safe world of the Catholic high school, which, as problematic as it was secure and you were loved and you knew what was happening. And then here I am in the middle of 30,000 people at Brooklyn College, and nobody knows my name and nobody could care less. And I'm in class trying to like defend some social science problem on the basis of the existence of God. I was sunk. I was having a nervous breakdown. It was 1966, 1967. The Vietnam thing was happening. Everything, the ground just was going right out from under my feet. So I started having a nervous breakdown. Mm-hmm. So I dropped out of school, and I met this guy and got married. And I never had bride fantasies. I was going to be a writer, but I got married because that's all I had to hold on to. And that lasted for a few months, and then it still wasn't working, and I was still starting to have a nervous breakdown again. So I thought, maybe if I have a baby. Maybe then I'll know who I am. So I had the baby, and then all that was left was like between times, like between when the baby was sleeping and stuff like that. And so I started to write my little poetry to express myself. Because also what was happening, there was folk singing, right? So like Dylan and Baez and all those people, right? So I wrote my little feelings, and I didn't really like poetry, but I liked writing my own. So I would do that. And then one night, I was always watching television, because that's all there was to do when you're a neurotic housewife. You know, you watch TV. So, but one night I turned on public television, and I saw this program of black women poets, and they were like just standing there. They were just standing there, and like they were in the camera. They had podiums, they had papers, but they didn't look at them. They were just like this. I remember Nikki Giovanni was there. I don't remember who the others were. I don't remember if Alice Walker was there or not, or Ntozake Shange at that point, I don't know. But I remember Nikki Giovanni. And there were a whole bunch of them. And they'd be looking in the camera, and they would be doing the poem. And their bodies would be going, and it would be in a kind of music. And I said, that's fantastic. I said, that's what it can be. This is not just about the little feelings on paper. Now, the other part of that was what I would do during the day to keep myself amused is I would sing songs to pretend like I was a famous singer and I had an audience. Now, I don't have a great voice, but I would do that, and my little baby Robin would watch and, and clap and stuff like that. But I knew I really knew I could never be a famous singer. But when I saw those women doing their poems, I said, I could do that. That's my performance. So I went into the bedroom, and I immediately sat down and wrote a poem, which I later entitled In Admiration of Black Style. And it was like completely off of the rhythm and the voice of what I had been hearing on the TV. I am cool. I have got to be cool. I have got to maintain my cool in the face of all adversities, otherwise I'll be gone. I'll be dead and gone. I'll be dead and gone and swept so low, sun won't never show above my head again. Oh, no. Because I'm just one woman. And it goes on like that. And I did it, and it was just boom, boom. And I called in Mike, who was my husband at that time. I said, Mike, you got to come in here and listen to this. And I did it. And he said, you sound like those women on TV. And then he said, and it was true because our marriage was in trouble, he said, someday I'm going to tell people I was married to Sharon Thomson. Now, that was nice. Again, there's someone else affirming that I'm supposed to be important, right? Even though we're breaking up. But anyway, that was how I got into performance poetry. It was through that program and watching those women. Now, the hard part was that I'm not black. So therefore, that wasn't my real voice. So I couldn't keep doing that and get away with it.
But it raised your consciousness to the point that...
What a performance poem, what a poem could be. Forget performance. This is what a poem could be. It could be alive, it could be in the moment, it could be in a room with people. And you get an energy going. It's not just a thing that's on a piece of paper. And the thing about the way those women were doing it was full of music. You hear the music of language. And then it's physical. The body moves with it. And you're not looking at the paper. It's like the words are happening for the first time as you're saying them. So this was a new possibility. And so then I had to find out, well, if I can't do the black voice as much as I loved it, so I had to find my own. And so then I started doing poems, I think, working off of the language of street kids in Brooklyn and stuff like that. And I started finding my own.
How did you get involved with the street kids?
Well, I was a street kid. When I was a kid, I was a street kid.
Oh,
I grew up in the streets. I mean, going back to where I grew up in Brooklyn.
I see. Okay.
Right?
Right.
The people who I grew up with. And that white, here it was, white working class Brooklyn street voice. That I could do. And so I was doing that, and then one day, and I would be doing readings in New York because performance poetry was happening. It was the late 70s, and also what was happening was the women's movement was reaching its peak, the golden age in New York City of feminism.
Late 70s?
Yeah, mid-late 70s.
Okay.
Oh, I left my husband in 73. Yeah, early mid-70s, actually.
Did that have an impact on your work, being a single mother?
Well, eventually.
On your writing?
Yeah. Yeah, eventually. Because once I had started doing it in performance, with the encouragement of the circle of women friends that I had, you know, and in a feminist context, and I was a single mother, and I didn't finish college, you see, because I wanted to be a writer. And I knew that. What was the point of being in college? I had to write. And it was a different side of the brain, and trying to do in college was making me sick. I said, I got to get out of here. I got to write. But I got a baby. I was on welfare. I pulled stuff to be able to stay on welfare and go to school at the same time.
Wow.
But at a certain point, I realized, because welfare was catching up with me, that I'd have to get a real job. And at that point, Mike was going to be remarried. I knew I had to choose. I had to choose because I didn't have money, I didn't have an education, I didn't have people who could support me. I had to choose between my daughter and my work, basically.
And you chose?
Chose my work. Now that's a harsh way of putting it. And my daughter and I have since had many, my daughter's now 27. We've had discussions about this. Mike was a good man. His wife was a good woman. She herself wanted to have a real family, and I would never be able to give that to her, and I knew that. So I let my daughter go live with her father at a time when feminism was happening, but it wasn't all that common a thing to do. But I knew that if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be a writer. Because when you're a single mother and you don't have money, all you do is you get the money, to take care of life, and you take care of your child. And that's what you do. So all of the circumstances of life made it possible for me to have another option. And so Robin went to live with her father and his new wife, and I embarked on being a poet, and I went to work for poets. First I was working at Poets and Writers in New York, which was as an administrative capacity, and then I went on to teach with poets in the schools, and then poets in public service. And at the same time, I was meeting the Grail. So I was being a performance poet in New York City, a feminist poet, all that stuff, and seeing my daughter on weekends and holidays and all that stuff. And then I was meeting the Grail. And
how did you meet the Grail?
Okay. My father died. He went to sleep one night, and then he didn't wake up again. He had a heart attack. And that was sort of a shock. You know, that sort of took life and turned it upside down. And I found myself at that point probably more traumatized than I realized, and this spiritual longing started coming up in me again, having abandoned Catholicism and Christianity because it didn't make sense for me anymore. And having tried astrology and having tried all these different types of esoteric spiritualities, I knew that they weren't it because they weren't hitting in the same place that Catholicism had once hit for me. I mean, I was really into the religion as a child. I would go make visits to church. I would work myself into a prayer frenzy. And it was real. It was real. And so nothing was doing it. And then here's my dead dad. And like, what does life mean when someone you love can just be gone? One day they're there, and then the next day they're poof, gone. So what's the point of a life? And that sent me into a bookstore, and I started pickups up by Thomas Merton, who's this famous Trappist monk who's quite well known for trying to bring together various spiritualities. And I was reading his book, and suddenly I had to start having these feelings, I want to be a nun. And I said, well, this is ridiculous. I do not want to be a nun. But maybe I want to like live with nuns. And I could like clean their house. And like they could be in silence and walking through the halls. And I could be in contemplation and have that feeling of closeness to whatever this spirit thing is. So I started asking around if there were any, nuns looking for someone.
Can I come clean your house?
And like I live with you, and don't make me pray with you, but can I like be around it?
It's a great way to learn.
And then I remembered some priest I knew from Brooklyn College who I'd known from political activities there. And I went and I told him. He said, well, it's a funny thing you're asking me that, because I was just up at this place in Cornwall, New York, called the Grail. I said, the Grail? What is the Grail? You asked me that just now, didn't you? And he said, I don't know. He says, they're the semi-religious group of women in upstate New York. Now, of course, I have since told Grail women that they were defined as semi-religious. They were like, what does semi-religious mean? Anyway, he told me about them. I gave them a call, and they said I could come up and visit. And I eventually did. And the minute I hit the property, not quite sure what they were, but I finally saw a definition. It said the Grail, as what I just gave you, basically. The Grail is an international movement of women committed to spiritual search, social change, and the release of women's creative energy throughout the world. Now that was in the late 70s. Since then we've added ecological sustainability.
That's important.
That's
Very
important.
necessary.
Yes, and that's like a new insight from the last 20 years. But so I saw that. I said, that's okay, because I was scared to death of getting in with these like Catholic Christian people who could be nuns or semi or I didn't know what. But I went anyway because they kept writing me letters. I was supposed to go, and then I didn't go, and they called me, and they said I should come, and they pursued me. And they said, and you should come this weekend, and then Ann Burke will be showing her slides from South Africa. And I thought, oh, great, I need to watch some old lady's, slides from her vacation. I was so unpolitical. And I never imagined what the slides would be. I thought it was going to be like giraffes and zebra in the Pampas or something. And it turned out, of course, it was the, pictures from the riots in Soweto.
And you saw these when
I went up for my visit finally, yes. that
So
this,
it totally politicized you going there?
yeah, eventually it did.
Actually.
And they asked me, well, would you do your poetry? And it's like, oh my God, I don't know who these people are. I've been living the life in New York City, and like now they want to hear I don't know what to tell them. But yet I want to tell them the truth because I'm thinking I'm going to come live with them. They should know a little bit of who I really am. So I had to choose carefully. And also a little concerned, like not everybody gets poetry. So I chose well. I sat down. We're in the living room. They're sitting around. I started doing the poems, and they were like right there. Their eyes are like in my eyes, because that's what I would do, the performance thing. And I'm getting the energy off them, you know, and I'm giving it back. And they were there the whole time. And they laughed in the right places, and they looked serious in the other right places. I said, this is interesting. These people get poetry. So I found out much later, I mean, they have a whole history of culture. I mean, when the Grail began in the 20s, they were doing dramas, stadium dramas, with casts of thousands. And 20,000, 30,000 people would come to see it. This was in the era of the fascist movements. And the Grail was also begun as a young women's movement as an alternative to the fascist youth movements of the time, because everyone was idealistic, so they wanted to channel this into another kind of idealism that wasn't fascist. So, of course they knew what poetry was. They were reading poems and doing dramas all the time. They had a culture. So in addition to all this political stuff and all this understanding of the special role of women in the world, because that's what it was founded on, the idea of bringing women's sensibility into the public sphere, and that these women would have as rigorous a training, spirituality, as any nun or priest, but they wouldn't be nuns or priests. They would be ordinary folk living in the world. Some would raise families, some wouldn't. Some took a promise of celibacy, not a vow. It's not in the context of the Vatican. But within the context of that community, a vow, a promise of celibacy was made, which is an interesting option, I have come to understand. So all these different lifestyles together. And then discovering, yes, it came out of Catholicism, but in the 60s it went through a transformation. It became ecumenical, and then Jewish women were coming in, and so then it was interfaith, and then at that point that broke open, and then it became about just women in spiritual search. So you got all this diversity in lifestyle. You got all this diversity in spirituality. You got all this diversity in terms of some of them were Marxist-Leninists, and some of them were just sort of Democrats. And that whole, and everything in between, and maybe even a couple of Republicans, but they didn't, they didn't speak up too often. And and then the age thing. You got these older women and then younger ones. At that time I was 29 when I came, and those women were already, many of them, 60 years old.
Was there a big, I guess, chasm between the ages? I'm trying to get a sense of I've never even heard of the Grail, so like, why am I hearing about it for the first time when I'm 30? It seems like a secret or something.
And there's a secret handshake too, but you don't get to know it until you join. The Grail was very well known in the 40s and the 50s in Catholic progressive circles, like the Catholic Worker, for example. Right? There was a Catholic Back to the Land movement at that time. There was a very progressive Catholic circle in the 40s and the 50s, which the Grail was part of, and it was well known in those circles. We had a center here in Philadelphia. We still do. It was very active at that time. So that because it was pre-Vatican Council, when everything became ecumenical and then became more diffuse, at that time it was part of this Catholic Renaissance in the United States. And well known and well known. Okay, and then comes the 60s and everything went, it blew apart. Nothing was holding anymore. Everyone was disagreeing. Some people said, I don't even believe in God anymore. People were leaving the Grail, people were leaving all the religious orders. The terms changed suddenly and radically. So that put the Grail into like a withdrawal phase. It had to find out once again, well now, if we're not like traditional Catholic anymore, if we don't believe in a leader anymore because there was no more president, forget that. Right? And then here come the 70s with feminism and lesbianism and all of the, the insights of that time. And then comes liberation theology and all the Marxism and class analysis and everything was just getting broken down. The Grail didn't know what to call itself anymore. So it went into retreat. It went into a period of processing within the community to find, well, what is the point of our being together? Who are we as a community? Where do we stand together? If we're not all agreeing to the same thing, what is it that we know that is still holding us together and that we're all still part of? Because there was something there, and they knew it. I wasn't there then. I didn't come till '79, when a lot of the work had been done.
Okay, so tell me about this Grail House now and how...
All right, so the Grail Center also went into retreat, and the Grail House was maintained, but basically with one Grail woman living there and a lot of boarders, students who would come and pay rent, but it wasn't being used as a visibly Grail place. It was just a property that was being maintained. And then as the 80s came, and there were Grail people in Philadelphia, and they would meet periodically.
Okay.
In secret.
I know, like, how is this held together? That's what I want to know.
They've stayed together. And once a month, they'd have a meeting. They would talk. They would share spiritually. They'd pray. They'd have a dinner. And they'd be there every month, still holding themselves together.
And you were part of this?
No.
Okay.
No. This was all through the late 60s and the 70s. Now, I came in at around 79, and that was up in New York. And at that point, things were starting to get a little bit clearer. But still, they weren't ready to advertise. So that if somebody found out, a newspaper called and said, like, could we come and interview you? Say no.
Okay.
If anybody wanted to give you publicity, you'd say no. Yeah, and then there would always be the story about the one time they gave somebody an interview, but they didn't say it right, what the Grail was, and then everybody like got upset because it wasn't right, because we all had our own versions.
Ah, okay.
And so that you got one woman who's a strong feminist in the Grail, and another woman who wouldn't be a feminist at all, but might be a Marxist, and like they're telling their stories, and like they didn't want that out as the public image, so they didn't know what to say, so they weren't saying nothing.
Okay.
Now we've done a lot of internal work together, and most of the members of the Grail have really gotten to a point in their own life cycle that they understand that this is it. If we don't build the Grail now, if we don't get out there and let people know who we are, that we exist, and if we don't start recruiting people, in a sense, not like a cult, but people who want to make a serious commitment in a diverse women's spiritual community, we're not going to be no Grail, not in the United States. Now, like I said, we've got them in these other countries, and especially in Africa and the Philippines and Papua New Guinea and Australia, very active, very vital. In Brazil, very young Grails. But the northern hemispheres, in Europe and in the United States, they're older Grails. And so we're in danger of extinction. So we got to put ourselves out here now. So that's how I got to Philadelphia.
Okay.
Having gone through the poet thing and come to the Grail and gotten this insight about, I was starting to get tired of being the only one up there doing the poem. I was getting tired of being the one who was going to bring the spirit in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to the Grail, and we would, finally I did try praying with them. I found a new way to see Christianity so I could sit and pray with them. Mm-hmm. And they would celebrate, and I saw what a ritual was. When it's not like in a church, I saw what the potential for ritual was. And I said, this is really amazing. And as a poet, I was inspired to begin to use my poetry making in the interest of creating rituals for and with the community. The meaning of that is that I was a contributor. It wasn't just my show. But I brought a talent, and someone else brought music, and someone else could move, and someone else had a different idea, and someone else would say, I don't like that part that you said. Could we do this other part? And I would have to negotiate the creative product.
So now, do you like this now, being sort of a ritual leader?
A ritual leader. I decided to call myself?
I want to say a playwright, but it's not really a play.
No, it's not a play. It's not a play. It's not a drama. We're calling it an audience. It's not even going to be really an audience because we're going to ask something for them too. So I was having these highs, these ritual highs in the Grail, and I had lots of friends who weren't in the Grail and who weren't even necessarily, believers. They were spiritually hungry. but there was no place that they could go with that hunger. They were longing for ritual. They were longing for a sense of spiritual community. And they were trying stuff out everywhere. I said, there's something here that if we could get this outside the Grail, it could mean a lot to people. But how do you bridge the gap from a community that share a certain belief system about what the spirit is or what spirituality is? How do you bridge that gap in a secular world? Well, art, I think, has always, in a secular world, been performing the religious function. Because religion doesn't play the same role anymore. You go to art for a spiritual experience. If you don't go to church, you're going to a show, you're going to a play, you're listening to music. You're getting it through art. So I said, I want to try to get this Grail experience out in the world, but free it from the need to believe in a particular ideology, so that we can have a shared spiritual experience without counting on a dogma or theology. So that has taken many years to try to work out. And so I wouldn't call myself a ritual leader. I mean, that's not the most important part. What I realized was, as a poet, I made the transition from I will be the one to bring the spirit in the room to we are the ones who bring the spirit in the room. And my role as the artist, my understanding of the artist, is the one who has easier access to a place that art comes from. But everyone can get there. And everyone can express that in some way. I believe in excellence. I believe some have talent, for more. But everyone can sing a song and have the pleasure of the song. Everyone can move their body and have the pleasure of that. Everyone can write a poem and have the pleasure of making the poem. Some will be better than others or more gifted. So I said that if there was some way to create an environment in which the spirit could occur. So I think of myself now as an environmentalist.
With the piece.
I create poetry, ritual, theater. I, as an artist, can help to create an environment in which all of us can access that place that the artist goes to, which is, in fact, the place of spirit.
Okay. Now,
and if I create a good environment, I will inspire people to bring that forth. That's my challenge, is to create a good environment, which means a good skeleton script, a good process that inspires people to want to bring forth. All right, so I had pulled together the Circle and the Light in the context of the Grailville community, and I did that in 94, 95.
Okay. Are we rolling? Yes. Okay.
And that was easier because you got a built-in community. Now there are people who are working there, or people who have friends or children or mothers or whatever, and that was easier to pull together. Now Philadelphia asked me to come here to do this work here as part of their effort to be more visible. They've started doing programming again the last few years. They've been doing programs on ecofeminism, on racism, on Celtic spirituality, things of that sort, meaning they're trying to reach out now. They don't just have their own little meetings, but they're trying to be more visible. And they thought, well, if I came here, this would be an opportunity to do a very public thing and put it in the paper and arouse interest in the Grail through this work. So I came last summer, and we've been doing a series of programs along the way. And through that series of programs, which included a day-long seminar on the Grail myth, I brought some ritual elements into that, as well as the rational elements of what the Grail myth is, where it comes from, etc. We've been attracting people. Leslie, where is she here? Yeah, Leslie. Leslie came in off the street. She was attracted to a program I did called the Poetry Path.
Not exactly literally off the street.
We advertised one of the programs I did called the Poetry Path. That's the thing I do. I work with people and helping them to make poems. And we call that the Poetry Path.
Is it like a workshop?
Yeah, it's basically a writing workshop, but the focus is poetry as a spiritual practice.
Okay.
So she was attracted by that. So she calls, and I start telling her what the Grail is, and all that. Well, that sounds kind of interesting. And she came late to the Poetry Path, but then she heard about the Circle and the Light, and just said, well, that sounds kind of interesting. And so that it was through this series of programs that I did here that many of the people who are here tonight came through that and were attracted to the idea of doing a ritual theater.
Okay. So you were brought here to Philadelphia to sort of do these ritual theaters
To do this one, to do the circle in the light, a search for the Holy Grail.
here, and you stayed in Philly.
Well, I came last summer, and I did this series of programs, and now we're ready to do the ritual, and
Oh, so that's all part. That was all part of working up to the
it's all
ritual.
working up to this moment. You see?
Ah, are you going to leave? Now that you've done it? Or are you going to take it elsewhere? You don't know that.
Oh, well, no. Here, okay. Here's the deal.
Confused.
See, I work for the National Grail.
Okay.
I work for the National Grail. And my job, and I've had this job for a couple of years, because the National Grail is interested in becoming visible. This is the part where I said we've realized we're going to do it now or we're not going to be in the United States at all. So we've created this thing called National Grail Programming, and I am called the program consultant.
Okay.
And I go around to different parts of the country and help to do certain animation things, you know, to help the Grail groups to do something to help make themselves more visible in a way that's true for them. Sometimes they want to do my thing. Sometimes they want to do something else. But my job, and Maureen Tate, who's my Grail team member, she's in the show tonight. Our job is to find the thing that's going to help some Grail people to be willing to be public about being Grail, to do something that's true for them that will attract people to them. So my job is to touch bases with a lot of Grail people around the country. But I have decided, for the time being, to be based in Philadelphia.
Okay. So now, if I wanted to be part of the Grail, what would I do? I would
Come to a Grail thing.
I could come to this, though, and then I would, what, pick
Yeah.
up the literature, and you would have monthly meetings, or?
Well, actually, what we're going to do is, and I'll have it available in the programs that we give out, we're going to have a date set for anybody who's interested to come to an Introduction to the Grail workshop meeting in April. So anybody who's interested in the Grail movement after this can then come and hear more about the Grail itself. Meet the Grail women here in Philadelphia. Find out what it's about, what does it mean. Hear about some of the programs that we're planning, not just here, in New York, in New Jersey. When I leave here, I'm staying based here, but my next project is going to be to go to the South Bronx. We have a Grail team in the South Bronx, and they're going to write their own piece. They're just going to do it from beginning to end, from scratch. They're going to create their own ritual. And the theme of theirs is going to be, "We shall not give way to evil," which is the slogan of the Bronx. We discovered it's on their shield, the motto of the Bronx. I mean, well, here's the South Bronx, and these people have been struggling for years and years, you know, to hold on. So I thought that'd be like a great ritual piece, right? So we're going to work together on the whole thing. So what a person can do is, there are lots of Grail events happening in different places that you can begin to go to. You want to get to know the Grail. You come, you hang out. Leslie, you know, she's hanging out. And you come and you meet folks, we do stuff, we do it together, you work with us. And then, if it feels right, you can ask to begin what's called a participation process group. Now what that is, and there is one happening in Philadelphia right now, there are 2 women in the process of joining the Grail. And they meet with their group every 6 weeks, something like that, and really talk about what does it mean to be committed in the Grail. It's a discernment process. Is this something I really want to do? These are my questions. And everyone's got questions about, like, do I really have to be Catholic? Or is it going to be a problem that everybody isn't Catholic? I mean, all of the polarities exist. So they want to get cleared. Can I really fit in here? Can I really be in this community? So you go through that participation process, and at the end of a period of time, of a year maybe, or however long it takes, you say, okay, I want to make this commitment. And then we do, and you learn the secret handshake.
And you're part of the Grail. Tell me about this piece in particular. Can I see this secret? No, I guess it's a secret. Never mind. Okay. Tell me about just this particular piece, like how you wrote it, why you wrote it.
I did the research. I wrote it because the Grail was having the Grailville was having their 50th anniversary, and they asked me, they commissioned me, to do it. Commissioned me, they didn't give me money. They said, the community needs this piece. Would you do it? Now that's a beautiful, interesting thing. So many artists are living in isolation. And just like you always feel like you got to make it to get your audience, whatever your medium is, you got to fight like hell, and usually end up fighting with each other to get there. So I left New York City. Couldn't handle the scene. And after all that, well, you're going to be so famous someday and nothing's happening, you know? But here I am in this community, and I started to feel like, well, I must be a failure. And then one day I was working on one of these ritual pieces, and I realized I'm not a failure at all. I've been published. I've got stuff published. I've got a background here, but it's not anything that I had anticipated. Nothing that seemed to make it worthwhile that I had let my daughter go live with her father, for example. Right. But anyway, I've realized that I was not a failure. I was a tremendous success because I had gotten exactly what I wanted. I had gotten the ability to function as an artist with a community of people that really cared about my work. And I didn't have to fight anybody or compete or convince or sell or do anything. They would say, write this, we're waiting, we want to do your work. And so I felt real lucky and blessed at that point. And I would like, I think, for this medium to be more widespread, so that someone like Leslie is here observing all of this because she feels she could write she's a poet, she could write a poetry ritual theater piece on a different thing that's important to her. She thinks she could do something on rape, that could be really healing. See, I've finished another piece, my next piece. I mean, I'll do the Circle in the Light if somebody wants it, but the next thing I'm on to is related to breast cancer. Breast cancer as an environmental disease and a political question and a feminist issue.
And you're going to do that in the same way, a ritual?
Right, and I'm going to work with women who have had it. Now here's the little twist on it, though. This is not just like about breast cancer and let me tell my breast cancer story. This is like working with women who have had the disease or those who have lost somebody or dealing with somebody close to them. Because it's a metaphor, it becomes a symbol for what is happening to the world. It's these women, all right, so if I tell you the whole working title, you'll get it. It's called Rage and Healing, a ritual by surviving warriors from the clan of the not-so-many-breasted women on behalf of the great mother and planet Earth. That's the working title. You get it?
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I had breast cancer. It's not that. It's like, I got breast cancer, and I got to tell you something. It's happening to everybody, and it's happening to the mother, and we've got to do something about it. See, that's the other thing. How do you get politics and art together without it coming out didactic and, and like you feel like you're getting hit over the head by something? How do you have a theater of conversion? And that's in terms of touching the spirit, but also you change your life around your perception of reality. This is a very apolitical time we're in now, and it's a very dangerous time. And people feel hopeless. How can we get some energy channeled into being involved in this material world and into the crisis that we're in as a planet and as a people?
I think you're doing it with your work.
Trying.
And I thank you. It's very healing, and it's wonderful to see. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
Okay.
I could talk more. You didn't ask me all my, I got more stories. I got more angles on it.
Well, is there something that you want to say that...
I don't know. I was just getting warmed up.
Only you can say that right then.
Wow.
No, I was just rambling. But I guess you will sort of pull all that together, right?
Oh, yeah.
We talked about the Grail, we talked about the meaning of poetry, ritual theater, right?
Right.
Those are the main things. How to be a writer. I mean, there are lots of downsides, I mean, being a writer in community is really hard.
Actually, I do want to ask you a couple questions.
And you didn't ask me about
process as a writer.
Oh, yeah, it's really hard. Like...
Okay.
Because, I mean, so the community asked me to work, but sometimes, like, I want to work on my own stuff, too. And that's really hard. when you're really in a living, working community, because the needs are so pressing. It's like everything else. It's like something is always more important than that. So very often people appreciate the product, but they don't understand the process, which involves a lot of like staring off into space and reading books and like seeming like you're doing nothing. And that's hard in community, when people are working really hard all the time just to hold things together.
The community being
Like when I lived, when you live in a living, working community like the Grailville, where folks are like hanging on, and I'm being an artist, So I also had to do other things. I had to do programming. I had to do administration. You have to take care of business every day and then still be able to write. And I find that difficult. I find that I need to go into like a whole other kind of consciousness, and the everyday practicalities of getting business done is not conducive to that for me. So the way I finally write is, well, certainly the pieces have been written under tremendous duress in the midst of everything else, and they were getting done because they had to be done. I like the research part. There's a lot of research and there's a lot of reading, and that's acceptable because that's kind of work. That's research for the piece. Harder is to get back to writing my own poems again, or my monologues. I write monologues, my performance stuff, and I'm starting to have a feel for that again. I would like to write a monologue again. And that's a harder thing to do because it means moving out of the busy, do. And so on the one hand, I like being the creativity of being a director and helping to pull together a ritual theater piece like that. But on the other hand, I couldn't possibly be writing at the same time. On the one hand, I like helping the Grail to build the movement, to turn people on to this possibility. Like you said, you never knew about it. It sounds great, right? Well, you'd have to get to know more if you really thought it was great. But it's a worthwhile thing. It's worth people knowing about. I like doing that, but at the same time, how do I do that? And take the time out to go into what's essentially a state of contemplation. It's the action contemplation dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, where are you as an individual in the Grail, as your own artist,
Mm-hmm.
rather than it's so community based. It seems like that. Do you lose a sense of yourself in that?
I'm valued. I mean, people acknowledge the gift that I bring, and I acknowledge the gifts that they bring to other parts of the community. I think I've been given a lot, and I get a lot of respect within the community. There is sometimes I've had to fight to be an artist and to not get sucked into just doing business, and to affirm that, even as part of Good for the Grail vision. If I hadn't fought, and if they don't give me the space, there wouldn't be no Circle in the Light. So ultimately, it's good for the Grail for me to be an artist, and people understand that. So I am perceived as an artist within the Grail. I do have that identity. But I'm also understood to be an artist not as the star, or an artist not as, oh, well, then she's different than the rest of us and gets off the hook of the other stuff. But that's my role, and somebody else has another role, and someone else has another role, and we've all got our parts to play. But we're all expected to be in there and making the whole thing work. And so that's a big challenge.
When are you finding time to write for yourself? How do you do? You stay up late at night or get up early? Or?
The best times for me are in the morning. The last time I've really written was when I finished the breast cancer piece, and that was last fall. I finished that around October, November.
Have you performed that yet?
No, not yet.
You're doing it next?
Yeah, that'll be the next thing, is to try to get a group together around that. And I'm also getting funding, working on getting funding for that, and it is fundable. And at that point, I think I will be bringing in other artists who believe in this way of working with people. I'll need a dancer, who can really work with people to help them to find their warrior dance. And I'll need people who do sound to help these women find their warrior sound. It's going to be beautiful.
Sounds very healing.
It's going to be great. And not just for them. And I believe that these things are putting energy into the world. This is work. This isn't just something, it's not just something that's happening here. This is an energy field, and we are creating, and it's going out and it's doing work in the world. So yes, it will be healing. It will be healing for those who prepare, it will be healing for those who come, but I believe that it's an energy that we are sending forth into the world around us. That's the only thing I know how to do. I mean, there was a time in the Grill when I tried to be a community organizer, and I tried to do political stuff, and I tried all this stuff, and it just ultimately had to stop. And I just came back. I am an artist now. The challenge is, how do I use my art on behalf of all this stuff that I know is important and that needs to happen, and yet be true to myself as an artist? When have I had time to write? Well, like I said, last October. This is March. But I've been doing this creative work in relation to the ritual. Fine. And then I want to try to get the breast cancer piece out there. So I'll be writing a grant. I'll write that. It's not the same thing. I will find another time when things are quiet, and I will go away. Because here's one of the things. I've got this van. That's my true home. It's got a little refrigerator and a microwave and a bed. It's my hermitage on wheels. This is one of the things I was able to get because of this breast cancer piece. I was able to raise the money to buy this van and to use it for this National Grill programming effort. So when I'm going around to all the different grill places, I'm in my van, and I'm like on these little journeys and these little pilgrimages. And like then I don't have a cellular phone. I should get an SOS phone, at least, I suppose. And nobody can get to me. And I have a date to be somewhere, but then there's that in-between time.
Solitude?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your necklace.
Well, it's a little Grail thing. It's a little Grail cup. It came to me, I think it was last summer, and it was in the Grailville bookstore. Grailville has a bookstore, an art and gift shop. And one of my dear friends in the Grail, Carol, she was sitting with me. We were outside talking. We were at a meeting. And Mary Ellen, who runs the bookstore, walked by with it, and I sort of said, I've got to have that. I said, how much does it cost? She said, well, $25. Too much for me. I don't make a lot of money. I'm, basically on subsistence, and I've got everything I need. I got everything I need. But I don't have a lot of surplus. So I said, oh, sounds too steep for me. And Carol was sitting next to me. She said, I'll buy that for you. So she did. So she gave it to me.
Oh.
And I said I should have that for the circle and the light. And that's how I got the necklace.
That's very nice. Is there anything that you want to talk about that I haven't asked you?
No, but I want to think about your question. When do I find time to write? That's an important question. And that's something that I'm having to figure out and work with. It's the missing piece. There's something about balance in life. There's got to be. There's got to be. And I have got to find a way to do integration. I mean, as it is now, one of the big challenges for me throughout this whole this production, I've done it a few times. This isn't the first time. I've done it before. The big challenge for me was to do it and to enjoy it and to relax and to have fun and to not just be completely stressed out and oriented on this has got to be great, this has got to be good, this has got to be anything. And I have made a few steps in that direction because I understand if I don't figure out, you can't imagine the stress connected with something like that. I mean, all of these people, most of them non-professional, and all of their schedules and all this, I'd make myself crazy. And finally, I figured out, I got to find a way to do this that I can be enjoying it. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to sustain the energy. Once again, it's about the balance. So I am in the midst of trying to find that out. And part of the balance is going to be, how do I find a way to be an activist, an artist activist, and also have time to go into that interior place where I begin to hear the voice again that wants to say something. Because I can't hear the voice and what it wants to say unless it's quiet.
Just to create that stillness.
So you're asking me an important question. And it's a question.
You're asking us important questions with your work. What would you say to younger people getting started to get in touch with their creativity?
Oh, God, what would I say to younger people? I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that doesn't sound like, just do it. I think that, though, there are a few things. That if you really give yourself to it, you will be taken. And more than you create, you will be created by your effort. That it will make something of you more than you will make of it. Because when you really give yourself to the creative life, you don't know where it's going to go. It is a very risky thing. It is a very unknown. And if you're really going to do it, you are going to be taken someplace that you can't even imagine now. And ultimately, it will create you. And that is very exciting and very beautiful. And I've come to that. Remember, my father died, and I wondered, so what's the point? And that's the point of ever being alive at all. And over and over, I've had to recommit myself to being a poet every step of the way. When I saw, I'm not going to be rich. Okay, so do I still want to do it? Yeah. Okay, and I go along. I'm not going to be famous. Do I still want to do it? Yeah, I still want to do it. I may not even be a great talent, which has come to me. I may not even be a great talent, which I had also hoped for. I'm not a great talent, maybe. Do I still want to do it? No, you're not going to make money. You're not going to have a profession, and you're getting older, girl. And it's like, yeah. And the reason is the journey. The reason is that I feel called to do this, and I can't explain it, and there's a work that I'm supposed to be doing. And when I got the breast cancer, that's what I came up with. I knew it wasn't time for me to go yet. There were two things, and I knew it. One of them was there were some lessons about spirit that I was supposed to learn. It had something to do with love, and I hadn't learned that yet. And the other thing was there was a work I was supposed to do, and I hadn't done it yet. And it has something to do with this.
And writing this
piece, and then the breast cancer piece is part of it. Now
and you had breast cancer yourself, so did that help you heal?
What, writing the piece?
Yes. Or how have you dealt with your breast cancer? I mean, is it in remission, or is it?
How have I dealt?
No. I mean, can you talk about that experience at all? It's late. It's like 11:30. I'm sorry. I'm talking because all the stuff comes out. It's like, whoa.
Breast cancer was perhaps one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Are you still rolling? Yeah. Okay. Do you want to talk about this?
Sure.
Okay. We should talk about this for a minute. Definitely.
Breast cancer was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Now, what do I mean by that?
Yeah.
I mean that it put everything into focus. This was a tremendous opportunity for me to really figure out what's really important in this life. And I was sort of stagnant at the time that it came. I wasn't following what I should be doing. I was stuck. And the joy had gone out of life, And the breast cancer happened, and it was a great opportunity every day I would breathe, do deep breathing. I started reading things. I started to understand the way in which my mind creates reality. I began to, and this is a very tricky thing. I just want to say this. It's not, there is a way in which I had an environment within myself that helped cancer to happen. I want to acknowledge that. And that doesn't mean that I gave myself breast cancer. It's a distinction. But there was an environment in me which allowed it to happen. And having it brought me to a point of having to change that environment inside myself in such a way that that wouldn't happen again.
Tell me about this environment, like bad energy or something that society had placed on you?
Well, first of all, let's acknowledge there are poisons everywhere. I just want to say that. I want to say that I think we've all got cancer. It's just a question of at what rate and how it's manifesting itself or not. We are systematically poisoned every day in everything that we eat, everything that we drink, everything that we breathe, everything that we wear. And that's what no one is saying. We are in the midst of a plague, and no one is calling it by its proper name. And that's why these breast cancer activists now are finally getting it. And they are adopting some of the tactics and the strategies of the AIDS activists. We're finally understanding something is happening here. We have gone from 1 in 20 women in 1960 to 1 in 8 women today are going to get it. And at this rate, by the year 2010, 1 in 4 women are going to have it. But it's okay, you see, if we could just find the gene. But no one's talking about what's making the genes transform themselves into cancer genes. Something's happening to make that happen. And meanwhile, the people who are setting up breast cancer month so we could all go and get our mammograms are the same people who provide the poisons for us to get the breast cancer that then they can take the picture of, and then they can give us some more poisons to cure it. You see, I got all of that straight through the breast cancer. There is a whole healthcare industry, and it's about making money and doing business. And they are all connected. Sloan Kettering's board of directors, and the American Cancer Association, and the chemical company that makes tamoxifen and then throws toxic waste into Africa. They are all connected. So, one of the ways I've dealt with my breast cancer is, first of all, to understand the ways in which I had an environment of fear inside of me. I was always afraid something bad was going to happen. And then it did. So I had to figure out, how can I believe in life and believe that life is going to be good to me and it's going to be good for me, that I don't have to be afraid that something bad's going to happen. So that was the spiritual leap that I had to make. And it's been through my whole life. I just wasn't doing the work well enough. And so the cancer thing came up. Now, it so happens my mother had died from it also. But I was already a hypochondriac before my mother got cancer.
How have you healed from this?
I've gotten over the terror of dying. I've come to terms with dying. That's what we're all running about. That's what we're all scared of, really. And it's not complete. If I've got a little symptom, I say, oh, this is it. I get that, everything starts, and then I got to have to talk inside my head to pull myself back again. But basically, I have come to terms with the fact that I am going to die. And guess what? We all are. And guess what? It's only a matter of time. And it's not an accident. It's not a mistake. It's not a problem. It's our destiny. It's our home. That's the place we've always been going toward.
When did we unlearn it?
I have to think about that. That's our home. So the idea is, what are you making out of your life in the context of what your ultimate destiny is? And that's why I say this was a tremendous gift, because it got me past the terror. And I understood what healing is. Healing is not cure. Good, you asked the question, how did you heal? What I got to understand is healing is not the same thing as being cured. And I got this through, Stephen Levine is a very interesting writer. He's Buddhist and all that. So I mean, I just want to give them credit, like, for helping me. It's like the black women poets got me to understand what poetry is. Stephen Levine got me to understand the difference between healing and cure. Because you got these Bernie Siegel people and, and all these New Age folks, and it's like, if you eat the right food and you do the right thing and you got the right mental attitude, you're going to be healthy, you're going to be great, and as if you're never going to die. No, that's not. You are going to die. You can count on it. What Stephen Levine got me clear on was you can heal yourself. And sometimes when people, and that means coming into wholeness. The roots of the word healing, health, healing, wholeness, and holy all have the same root word in English. They're all derived from the same, root. Okay. That sometimes people heal themselves, meaning they come into greater wholeness, and they live. They get better. Sometimes people heal themselves. They come into greater wholeness and completion, and they die because they're done. That healing, in fact, has been happening since the day we were born. Since the day we were born, we've been on a journey of healing, coming into greater wholeness, coming into greater fullness of who we really are.
So we can die.
That's right. And in fact,
move on.
That's right. And in fact, it's that journey. And when you're around people who are dying, who are really engaged in the dying process, you see something holy. There's the opportunity for some tremendous holiness and for some tremendous insight into what life is really about. And they are coming into their fullness. Sometimes, not every time.
Yeah.
It's a mystery. But I've seen it happen. And I would hope that that could happen for me. So how did I heal myself? I'm healing myself all the time. And now I know it. I didn't know it before I had breast cancer. And now I know it. And now I'm not terrorizing myself all the time by being afraid of dying or being afraid of something bad happening, which ultimately means then I'm going to die.
So you're more conscious.
I'm more conscious and I'm less scared. And that makes me a little bit bolder to live my life with a bit more boldness. Or at least, maybe I was always bold, but I was always bold and scared. And now I can be bold and joyous.
Well, thank you
Okay.
so much for sharing your work and your boldness and your brightness and your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie. You were wonderful. I'm very happy to meet you.
I'm happy to meet you as well.
You too, Joanne.
It was wonderful. That was a great interview.
It was very, very, I don't have a word for it yet.
Yeah.
You're sweet.
The whole evening. It was a good thing. Good stuff.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Anybody want a mint?